This is ridiculous and completely unnecessary and so beautiful. All of a sudden, going and getting toilet paper can actually be an adventure.
But 3 years later, they may have an entirely different skill set that would be useful on a new project too.
If this business was going to collapse because I'm on a flight, it's not a very strong business. All productivity advice should come with like a disclaimer of whether the person giving it like has kids or not.
Could you give us a peek into how you act as a CEO and lead your team?
God, this is America. There's like 38 flavors here that I could like pick from.
Maybe they don't understand their user's perspective.
With SaaS, you might invest that $250,000 to then find out that no one actually wants it or that you completely missed the mark. My brain is usually fried.
Hey, and welcome back to the Balanced Business Podcast. I'm absolutely thrilled to have a good friend of mine and fellow business owner, Amar Ghose. Amar, did I say that right?
No, not even close, but I love it. It's perfectly fine. We're not gonna restart it. That's like the internet age for you, right? It's like, oh, yeah, right. great friend whose name I cannot pronounce. Totally cool. You would never have guessed it.
So, Amar is the founder of ZenMaid, one of the leading booking software solutions for the cleaning industry. From humble beginnings, running his own maid service in California called Fast, Friendly, Spotless, Amar decided he wanted to branch out on his own and build the premier booking solution for house cleaning companies. Today, ZenMaid is a 7-figure remote software as a service, which serves thousands of maid service business owners all around the world. So I want to speak to Amar today about several things. I want to talk to him about how he's grown ZenMaid from humble beginnings as a cleaning business owner himself into what it is today. But I also want to talk to him about his digital nomad life. He's been living digitally since 2015. He's traveled to over 31 countries, all while remotely building his business. And I want to talk to him about some of his most memorable parts of being a digital nomad these past few years. So I hope you'll join me in this conversation as I talk to Amar, I share his story, and we learn a little bit about how he's built his company and how he's balanced his life in the process. So welcome to the show. I'm sorry, I messed up your name, dude.
All good. Thank you for having me. That was quite the intro. Yeah, the last name is, it's pronounced Ghose, so there's no way that you were ever going to get it because there's no H at the end, but it's certainly pronounced with an H. So yeah, all good there. And for the viewers, we are actually friends. We have met up in person multiple times. We just, don't say each other's last names very often, I guess. So
we both call each other dude or man all the time is why.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah. I was going to start basic, but I'm going to start with a pretty broad question, man. I'm going to ask you to recap these last 8 years or 9 years now since 2015. Can you share with us one of the challenges that you've had as you built ZenMaid and what one of the biggest accomplishments that you've had as you built ZenMaid is? What in your eyes do you think made ZenMaid a difficult business to build at that time? And what do you think makes it a great business to own is what I'm really asking here.
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, those two questions actually have the same answer. Very good questions that essentially what made ZenMaid difficult in the beginning is that it's such like a high trust industry that there's a lot of folks that there's a lot of like industry like organizations and groups like your group, right? There's lots of little groups that are out there. And that when you are new and trying to break into a new market, and especially when you were, younger, like I was when I started the business and stuff, it can be difficult to get people to take you seriously. I think any entrepreneur that started out young enough has probably experienced that in some way or another. And so that made it really difficult to get traction into the industry. And when you combine that with it being a lower margin industry compared to, let's say, pressure washing or carpet cleaning or something like that, there's not as much money in it, right? And so that makes it really difficult to get started. At the same time, it's a great business and it's a great business to be in because once you get past that, and I think this is true of a lot of businesses, that once you get over that hump, then all of a sudden it becomes not just a lot easier, but we essentially have a moat. It's really difficult for competition to catch up to us now because we've built up that brand equity and that brand trust. So it feels like it's ours to lose now. And from a lifestyle, like a winning standpoint or whatever, it's like, I'd much rather be in like a position to lose it all than have to be like gaining ground. You know what I mean? Right. It's on us to just like not screw it up. right? That if we keep doing what we do, showing up every day and best serving our maid services, we're not going to have any new competition that's going to come in and like wipe the floor with us.
And I think one of the really cool things about your team at ZenMaid is everyone at the early stage were actually cleaning business owners themselves, right? It wasn't just you. The whole team, from your customer support to the Zen Maid Mastermind moderators, everyone that you built into the team actually had a deep experience in the industry. So they could really speak as they're growing their own maid services to the problems that they had, and then you could adapt in real time to those problems. I think that's a really unique thing that a lot of softwares don't do. I find a lot of software owners, and there's no disrespect to them, they've built great businesses, but a lot of software owners will see an opportunity and they'll capitalize on it, but maybe they don't understand their user's perspective. And I find a lot of early stage software developers build a great MVP of a product, but it might not be an MVP that's actually needed because they didn't speak to the users early on, and they didn't have that experience from a user perspective early on. So they've built this thing that is cool, but maybe isn't so useful. Whereas ZenMaid was an integral part of many cleaning companies' businesses very early on because it spoke to those problems that they had.
Yeah, definitely. That was something that we got lucky with early on. That I essentially just had an early team member who I was paying like part-time. She was like a working mom, and essentially as part of her training and as part of her job at ZenMaid, I was having her like learn about running maid service because it would help her to talk to customers and to be more effective on the phone. Fast forward couple weeks, couple months, and she comes back to me and goes, check it out, and sends me a link to her new website. And she had started a maid service in her local area that actually became quite popular, and that became a massive asset to ZenMaid. And so that's really what planted the idea. And then from there, we just, for a couple of years, would just try to hire folks that, on the non-technical side, on the customer-facing side, we would try to hire current maid service owners that, were just looking for a couple extra hours of work from home or whatever. Former office managers, right? Our current head of support used to be the office manager for a maid service, and we would just try to find people that were genuinely deep into the industry. And so that's been harder as we've scaled, and now it's our development team is quite big, and none of those guys have any maid service experience for obvious reasons and stuff. Yeah, that's been one of our challenges with scaling is how do we keep that DNA in the company.
I'm going to go on a bit of a tangent with this question. I'm just curious, because we both have quite a nomadic lifestyle. Have you ever had a very serious outage or challenge that happened to ZenMaid while you were in a different country? And how did you deal with that? Was there a big update problem or any serious kind of situation where you were asleep while it was happening?
Well, so the answer is yes, just because I've been abroad and international for so much of ZenMaid's time that I left the US in 2015. And since 2015, I might spend 2 months a year in the US. But one of the things that I think is just interesting about the very question itself is what difference does it make? What difference would it have made if I was in the US, right? Right. Maybe with time zones of being awake or something. I can tell you that we did have a serious outage in 2017. That actually happened while I was in Las Vegas at the annual cleaning convention. But I had a flight to Thailand, a couple of days after that, and in the middle of this just complete storm of problems with the software, I had to jump on a flight and essentially be largely unplugged for 32 hours or something. At the time, it's I was traveling on a budget, and just I was just trying to get from the US back to Asia for as cheap as possible. Now it's you won't catch me dead flying for more than 20 hours. I'll pay extra to keep it less than that. But back in the day, it's 32 hours. Okay, I guess that's what it is. So yeah, there were things that happened. One thing though is that I'm non-technical. So if there's a problem with the software, there's nothing that I personally can do about it other than contacting the folks that are in charge. So with that, it's just about having good systems in place, and just, the same way that any business, should be set up so that there's no single point of failure. When we've had those issues, the team knows, if I'm unreachable, they know who to go to. And in a lot of cases, they're going to that other person in the team first. They're going straight to the CTO going, hey, there's this massive bug going on. And then they're essentially including me on that message, right? So for a long time now, it hasn't been you come straight to me with an emergency because you probably know more about it than I do. You know what I mean? And so that's one of those things that I think some people would look at that and go, oh, but you're the CEO, shouldn't that, isn't that kind of on you? And it's well, yes and no, right? To me, a strong business isn't reliant on that one person, right? If this business was going to collapse because I'm on a flight, it's not a very strong business.
That's a very good answer, because what I'm about to get at here, I'm curious. ZenMaid is no longer a small company, but you've been remote essentially since day one. I'm sure the first few months were in California still when you were building it, but almost since day one, when ZenMaid started to take off, you've been traveling. And so I'm curious, when you have these challenges happen, or you have an outage happen or whatever, I think you're right. In this day and age, it doesn't really matter if you're in the same country or not, as long as you have a good team. But what I think does matter, and what I'd be very curious about, is you as the CEO leading a remote team these past almost 9 years now. Could you give us a peek into how you act as a CEO and lead your team? What is the structure that you have in place? Do you have a management structure in place? Do you have a hierarchy? Do you run weekly meetings? How do you run your company as an owner with the stage that it's at now?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, yeah. So good question. I just want to caveat my answer, I guess, a little bit with, this is the stage that I am currently at. So this is just a snapshot of essentially kind of where I'm at, let's say this quarter, right? If you go forward, it's going to be different. If you look backwards, it's different. So this is not this is a chapter in my journey with ZenMaid. So right now I'm a little bit more involved and active than I have been for the past maybe a year or two. Although I still have been very active, but right now the way that it works is, so I have a team, a management team in place. So I have someone in charge of all of the major departments within ZenMaid, right? So CTO in charge of product and in tech. We have a director of demand gen that leads the marketing team, head of support, head of sales, all that. All of those people have anywhere from 2 to as many as 5 or 6 people that are reporting to them. So about 30 people in total, on the team. Lot of part-time folks. So right now I'm on a lot more calls that essentially I have approximately 6 hours of calls over an 8-hour period, 3 days a week. So my Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm effectively on calls from about noon local time until sometimes 8 p.m., sometimes 6 p.m. But I have all of my calls kind of stacked and batched that way. And these are all pretty detailed calls, right? They're the kinds of things where I'm my brain is usually fried by the time that I'm done with these calls. And I'm the kind of person that I like calls, right? I find calls energizing. I like getting on sales calls, those kinds of things actually give me energy. These calls, it's such kind of deep decisions that are being made and stuff like that within the product, within the marketing, all of these things that I oftentimes come out drained from that. With that being said, though, I would say that 80 to 90% of my work happens during those 3 slots. So in terms of work-life balance, it's I'm very structured during those times. But for example, today I can go to the gym whatever time that I want to. Right. And most days I can go to the gym in the morning anytime before noon. So I have a lot of flexibility, but that's currently how my schedule works. And then in terms of hierarchy within the company, this is a bit, maybe not a tangent, but I just think it's important to note, something that I've actually been talking to a couple of team members about recently, is so we don't have a strict hierarchy within ZenMaid. That we do have an established hierarchy where there are departments and folks do most folks will have like one person that like they're essentially like reporting to, but beyond that, there's no real like levels within the organization. And then the other thing is that we do what I believe is called a matrix organization. I think that's the term, where the way that I think about it is that ZenMaid is very project based. So in a lot of cases, it's like, okay, like I want to do this thing with the product. So we're working on checklists, for example, right? We're working on making checklists in ZenMaid better than they have been like in the past. With a lot of companies, it's okay, it's a checklist thing, therefore, or it's a product thing, therefore it goes to the CTO, and then the CTO will go and will, work with the designer and will talk to whoever he needs to, or we'll have folks, talk to our customers and like all of that stuff, and the CTO will lead it because the CTO is in charge of the product. At ZenMaid, what we do is we let individual team members take charge of individual projects. So we have like our most junior developer who's like just joined the company, like let's say like 8 months ago or something like that, is actually leading some of like our development. And in that capacity, he's acting as essentially the project manager. He's organizing all of the assets. He's tagging in, let's say, the CTO when the CTO needs time, or sorry, so when the CTO is needed on like a project, for example. And that's how we've started moving things forward. And so I think that's like a really important thing to mention, because one of the things that allows me to kind of live the life that I do is that we're constantly leveling up the team. And this is how we do it.
What you essentially said was you may have general managers for departments, but your entire team is mobile and adaptive, right? You don't have people boxed into a hole. This is your job title. This is what you do, and you don't deviate from it. No, if you're good at that and there's a new project that comes in, you can jump on that project and that's fine. That makes a lot of sense to me, because people are not static either. They may sign up for a specific job role, but 3 years later, they may have an entirely different skill set that would be useful on a new project too.
Yeah.
So instead of having to apply for permission to move to a new department, they can just see a project come in and say, hey, I'm interested in that. Let me work on it.
Exactly.
That's very cool.
Yeah. We have a woman on our team, Ticha, from Serbia, and she is she's like our QA tester. She's like written all of the automated tests in the system and everything, and is writing like some code, but she's like essentially handling all of our tests to make sure that things like don't break in ZenMaid and that we don't introduce bugs. She started out as a $4 an hour virtual assistant for us, like maybe 5 years ago or something. And on one of the calls that she was in charge of taking notes on, our CTO said, hey, I need someone that's smart but non-technical, that maybe is interested in like learning to develop in the future. So like I need to bring someone in to do this, because it's grunt work that like a developer will hate their life, but someone else, it might be a good opportunity. And she literally just reached out to the two of us and was just like, hey, like I know you guys are going to hire someone for that, but if you could give me a chance to just like try next week, can I just like give this like a go? And like literally went from that to now she's actually writing code, pushing it in the thing. And I think we pay her like, I mean, we pay her, like low 4 figures a month, but I mean, like it's like her life is completely different because we gave her that opportunity, and because she stepped up and asked for it. And that's part of the ZenMaid culture.
Ooh, that is cool. This is music to my ears. We don't do it exactly the same way to Nova Local, but we do it a similar enough way that I'm listening to all this and I'm going, wow, this makes perfect sense. So this is in a way, I was thinking about this the other day, Amar. What we do at Nova Local and what you do at ZenMaid may be slightly different. We're doing admin services, you're doing booking softwares, but our teams and the way that we operate and the people that we serve are very similar. I've always found there's a lot of synergy between our two companies.
Yeah,
so it's
very
interesting
similar.
to get a little sneak peek into the behind the scenes of ZenMaid, right?
Yeah.
So I'm taking notes right now. I want to shift a little bit to the remote side of your lifestyle. So we've talked a little bit about ZenMaid and some of the challenges you've had and the way that you've structured your team to grow. But I wanted to know, in your personal life, a little bit about how you've juggled actually balancing business and life and health. And so one of the questions I had for you and Fran, I know Fran can't join us today, but both you and Fran have developed and maintained a really remote lifestyle for a fairly extended period of time. In my experience, most people who do the digital nomad thing, they may make it to year 2 or 3, but rarely will they make it to year 5, and very rarely will someone make it to year 10, right? I think you're almost at that 10-year mark, and you've had a lot of really interesting experiences over the years. And so one of the ones I'd love to hear a little bit about is the active volcano summits that you used to host. I'm curious if you could share some of the most memorable experiences you've had as a nomad while you've been building a business at the same time.
Definitely. So the volcano retreats would definitely be one of like the top ones. Other things that come to mind is like when Fran and I, early on when we started dating, we did a trip to Morocco after being here in the UK, seeing her family in December. We went to Morocco in January and did 30 days in Morocco, and that was one that was just I don't know, it's just unlike anywhere that I've ever been before. We went with my CTO and Maria Gonzalez from the industry, who some folks may be familiar with. And so it was like us there, and that was just really amazing. I remember there was a conversation on the beach when I like turned to my CTO and was like, "She's the one." I'm going to marry that woman. And this is like, maybe like a couple months after we'd been dating. And like, it was quite like nice. But yeah, like so many different things. So essentially I was traveling for 8 years, and now I don't really consider myself to be a nomad like as much. I have the ability to like do that, but like we're not really as much. One of the coolest things I think has been being able to see team members and to actually build the company physically with team members around the world, that just because of like my lifestyle, and then because we've been remote early on, we have done multiple retreats in Thailand, right? Like I've seen my CTO now, I think in 7 countries, like around the world and everything. And that's something that's really cool. And so we don't get together all that often, but when we do, it's always like making memories and like moving things forward and stuff. And so that's just like really powerful. Iceland was a really good one. But I mean, honestly, I think that for me, what I really just enjoyed was, while doing the nomad thing, the best thing about sort of traveling is that everything becomes an experience, right? That if you're watching this, you probably don't think twice about going to like the local Safeway or whatever your local grocery store is, because you've probably been there hundreds of times before, right? When you land in a new neighborhood in Thailand or in some country that you've never been to, all of a sudden going and getting toilet paper can actually be an adventure, right? Or like, I was just thinking about how frustrating it is. Like, you know how it's difficult when you're like in the supermarket to tell what is like laundry detergent and what's like dishwashing detergent, now imagine doing that with like a bunch of squiggly lines on boxes, right? Like it's hard enough in English to figure that out. Like you go into some countries and you're just like, okay, all that I know is if I put this into this machine, it's going to smell nice. I don't know if it's going to be clean, but it's going to like smell nice, right? And so it gives you an appreciation for all of like the little day-to-day things that I think we take for granted when we're settled down and we're not like traveling. And so to me, the magic of sort of being a nomad was actually just like having a call like this, finishing the call, closing the laptop, and then whatever I'm about to go do, no matter how normal it is in everyday life, it actually just being something interesting and something that I was like intentionally kind of like thinking about. And to me, I think that's really the magic of travel and being a nomad. It was less about kind of like we had a really great week here, or like did like the Maldives or whatever it is, those are nice. But to me, it was actually more the day-to-day quality of life of, it's just a random like Wednesday, and now that I'm done with work, I can go to the beach.
I very much agree. I'm sure you've heard of the term the slow travel movement. Mm-hmm. I'm very much an advocate for that too. I think the whole digital nomad scene has really promoted people sitting at their laptops on the beach, which I think is really stupid in reality. If you're at the beach, be at the beach. Go work and then go to the beach, don't do both at the same time. It's going to make both experiences worse.
Yeah.
But this slow travel scene has really taken hold of the nomad community and the travel community these past couple of years. And to me, that's a really meaningful type of travel where you stay for 2 or 3 or 4 months in a place and you get to know a little bit the people there, and you get to have a little bit of a routine and a little slice of that life rather than just a vacation. You're traveling and experiencing life rather than just doing crazy stuff all the time, right? There's a place for that, and that's really fun, but it can't be your normal life all the time.
Yeah.
And if you're going to be a nomad, you got to have down periods.
Got it. Exactly. And so to me, the way that I always thought about it is like, I live here now. I may only live here for a month, but I'm not like visiting someplace, right? Like maybe like a week-long trip is like cool. I'm like visiting Bangkok, right? But like if I went to Bangkok for a month, it's no. I'm living in Bangkok, right? Like I have to get up and running very quickly. But like living means that I'm going to have like a regular, like, you know, grocery store to go to or whatever. I'm going to have a couple of restaurants like on rotation. I'm going to find a gym immediately. I may have like a co-working space, but it's like, no, I'm going to settle in and be in good habits for 4 weeks in this place. That was something that's how I've always traveled before. And so that's actually something that's been a really, really big shift now that I'm based in the UK and I'm not traveling that way, is I don't get that anymore. You know, my last trip to the US was 11 days and was a complete whirlwind. It was nothing like nomad travel. You know, like I was so tired by the end of it, you know, barely got a chance to, you know, work out or like anything like that, you know.
Get a little philosophical on you for just a second here. And then I'll go back to the interview. It's really interesting. I'm big on meditation, and one of the things that meditation teaches you is a healthy disassociation from your emotions. If you're experiencing anger very strongly, for example, you're not detaching yourself from the anger. You're noticing that you're feeling it, and you take a little step away from it, right? Just so you notice that you're noticing it. It's very meta in that sense. I found a very similar thing with travel over the years for me. By being out of my home country for so long, I'm still attached to the US and the UK. Those are my homes, of course, where I'm from. And so when I go back there, I notice all of these things that I never would have noticed if I hadn't spent time outside of them, living a different life in Japan or Korea or wherever, right? I'm curious if you notice the same thing where you go back to America and it just hits you in the face, everything that you didn't notice before.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's another thing is that this is, I think, a little bit less common or like maybe like understood or whatever. But another thing that's like magical about travel is the appreciation that it'll give you for your home. Because I guarantee you that wherever you live right now, your home is amazing for ways that you probably just aren't aware of at like no fault of your own. But you go somewhere else and then come back and it's like, I don't ever want to live in the United States, like, again, for a variety of reasons, right? One of the largest ones is just no like walkability in vast majority of places, which to me is like my number one thing for quality like of life. But you know, along with my wife being British and like and all of that stuff. With that being said, I absolutely love the US and I absolutely love going back to the US and visiting. And every time I'm there, I am blown away by like so many of like of the things there. And there's so many things that I see in the US that I am like so jealous that I don't have access to, being like, you know, here or being away. And like, you know, but there's also, you know, cons to it, like as well. But yeah, like 100%, I found that my appreciation for growing up where I thought was like so lame and so boring and all of these things, going away for a couple of years and experiencing all these other amazing places, you know, and like even like better places around the world, you still come back home and go, oh, like, you know, there are these like just little things that you know, like clean sidewalks, you know, sidewalks. If you've been to Asia, you've been to places like Bali where there aren't sidewalks, right? Or there are sidewalks and like there's entire things missing where if you miss a step, you're just falling into like a, you know, like not like a sewer, but like a ditch, right? Like a sewer ditch, essentially, right? And like you literally see that like in other places in the world, and all of a sudden you realize like, oh, in the US, like actually, you know, I don't know, like these manufactured, like, you know, gated communities are actually really fucking like, you know, beautiful and impressive and crazy in their own way. And it's just something, you know, you don't appreciate that when you're younger because you don't have the reference experience.
For me, one of them was when I went to Greece for a month. I lived there and it was beautiful. And Greece is a first world country, of course. However, being a first world country, I assumed the drinking water was safe. I'd lived in Japan and Korea and the UK and the US, and I never thought about, you know, I've done trips to India. If you go to India, you know, you need to check if that hotel's tap water or that place's tap water is safe. It's top of your mind to check, right? But for me, one of the appreciations I very quickly got for the UK was I can go anywhere and drink the water. You know, like Greece, I I got dysentery
Oh,
in Greece
wow. Okay.
from drinking normal tap water.
Oh, jeez.
It was all good. It's all good now, but it was just that it made me really appreciate the simple things. You know, when people
Okay.
say to you, appreciate clean water, and you're like,
Yeah.
yeah. But
Yeah.
like, no, like I appreciate it.
So
now.
yeah. Makes sense. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Mine's a little bit more like positive, but to me, it's when I go back to the U.S., I just stand in front of like the Pringles, like section, or like the Oreo section, and I'm just like, God, this is America. There's like 38 flavors here that I could like pick from, like anything I want. And then you go like, you go to India and you can get like tikka masala Pringles, but it's literally tikka masala Pringles, regular Pringles, and like one other flavor, right? And it's, it's just like little things like that just like, you show up and you're like, this is ridiculous and completely unnecessary and so beautiful.
No one does variety and consumption like the U.S. So I'm curious on this topic then. You and Fran have really started to settle in the UK this past year. I wanted to ask you, you have a big life update now that you've settled in the UK. I'm curious if you could share that with us.
Yeah, so we got a puppy recently, which essentially like overnight, I feel like I went from being like a kid to like being like an adult, of like actually having like another living being that I'm like responsible for and everything. And so, yeah, we got a puppy that's definitely like going to slow us down in terms of travel. We are still going to be trying to travel like locally and within Europe, right? That we want to do a lot of like trains and stuff like that. But yeah, most like, flights and everything, it'll be, if I'm going to Bangkok later this year for a conference and to see some friends and stuff, and that'll be, like a 10-day trip, there and back, and Fran will stay with the with the dog. But, we were talking about this before we hit the record button, that it has made me much more like intentional. It certainly made me appreciate how much harder it would have been to do like the digital nomad thing, not just like with a dog or like even like with a kid or like anything like that, but just like with more responsibilities. Because I think that's something that, if you're watching this right now and you're, a business owner in like their 50s or 60s or something like that, this may not seem like all that realistic, and like or like, kind of doing the nomad thing. And that's where like everyone comes from like their own situation, like, to be honest, I got lucky, and it was very much like a timing thing that I had the opportunity to become nomadic when I was 25 years old, and I wasn't in a relationship. I didn't have any, anyone depending on me. I didn't, I like hell, when I left the US, I was paying myself $1,000 a month because like, I didn't, it didn't matter to me if like I was in a little bit of debt or was taking a little bit of risk or whatever, right? I was the only one that I was putting at risk, right? And now all of a sudden it's just like overnight, it just feels like, oh no, like, yeah, my time, like, it's not just my time, it's Lola's time, it's my wife's time, it's my family's time, and like, their time with me is being cut into when I'm wasting time, on YouTube instead of working. So like, it's made me a lot more intentional about how I spend my time, which has been really good.
I very much agree with what you said just a second ago too. I also started traveling at a fairly young age, similar to you. And so I didn't have those commitments. I started the business to be with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, in Japan. But I was jumping couches for a couple of years there, man, staying at my brother's place, my girlfriend's place, my parents' place. The amount of respect I have for people who start businesses with kids now is 10 times as great as it was before. Because it's real easy when you have no other commitments to say, just go work 60 hours a week and build this thing. It's real easy to tell someone that.
Yeah.
When it's just you. But when they've got a family and they've got a pet and they've got commitments and a mortgage, that's a different story. So the respect I have for people now building something is just so immense.
I saw that on Twitter recently of someone was saying that like all productivity advice should come with like a disclaimer of whether the person giving it like has kids or not, or it was something of like, if you don't have kids, I don't want to hear your productivity tips or something like that. No, it's just like, oh, now I get it. Because, like for me, it's like getting the dog, I've been waking up at 3 a.m. every day to take her out and everything. And like, I am so tired. I'm so exhausted right now, but I'm also fully aware that like having a kid is like, 5-10 times like harder than this. I think if you've never had a kid or never had a dog, then I think it's just going to be a rough experience, kind of what I'm going for. But like, I very much appreciate of like, this is like tip of the iceberg for like what parents are dealing with, and says, I have a ton of respect for that. For folks that just managed to make that happen. I mean, how someone could be working like a full-time job, be a parent, and then manage to start something on the side, in order to quit that full-time job. It absolutely blows my mind that people are able to do that.
I'm curious, in terms of where ZenMaid is going.
Yeah.
Now that you're settling down in one place a little bit more, now that you're a little more focused, even though you're sleep deprived, have your long-term plans for ZenMaid changed at all? Have you thought about the direction that you want to go with it? Now that your life is different and what you want out of life is a little different than when you started?
So I think that when I started ZenMaid, the goal of it, I mean, and this will hopefully be helpful for like folks like listening, is the goal of it was to give myself optionality in life. That like I think that I was young enough to know that I didn't know what I wanted yet, right? But I knew that whatever I wanted, making a nice amount of money from anywhere in the world and having control of my time was likely going to give me like the options to like do what I wanted, right? I think that was like the initial sort of thing when I started ZenMaid. And so with that in mind, it's like, I still think that it's here kind of for optionality. So I've always operated the business as I'm never going to sell it, but also in like it should be sellable like kind of way. So it's like I'm here for the long run, and I'm making decisions for ZenMaid around how do we do what's best for our customers, for this industry, for the company, looking on like a 5-year or like a 10-year like horizon, right? That like I think that if I were to sell ZenMaid someday, I would likely just turn around and take part of that money, buy another software company, and like go back to pretty much doing the same thing. In which case, it's like, why sell ZenMaid? Like why not just keep doing this and stuff? So yeah, I mean, right now ZenMaid has been my like personal growth vehicle, which I think is true for a lot of entrepreneurs. That I think if you're a maid service owner watching this, I'm guessing that you've grown tremendously as a person, not just professionally, but like also just in terms of like, dealing with other humans and like and stuff like that. That like ZenMaid continues to be that for me, that I show up every day and I feel like I'm getting better, I'm serving like more people, but like I'm also personally like growing and maturing and becoming a better leader, becoming a better manager, and all of that stuff. So I think that if I was no longer feeling that way, then that would be the time that I would probably consider moving on from ZenMaid. But even for that, I still think that I would hire like a CEO and would still be, kind of like, owner advisor, like kind of thing. That I do think that I bring a lot of value to the company, like personally. And I think that's going to continue for at least a couple more years. I could see at some point it be like, okay, actually having Amar here, like it's not any different than having like someone else who's a well-qualified like CEO. But right now I'm the person who bridges all of the maid service expertise and all of the industry expertise with like building the actual company and stuff.
Very good answer. And I think I'm going to guess that you feel similarly. One of the things I really love about both my cleaning company and my virtual assistant agency is the team that we've built. It doesn't even matter that we're offering cleaning services or VA services. The service is great, but the service doesn't matter so much as the amazing team that we've built. And that's what I don't want to sell as an owner. Mm-hmm. The amount of pain and grit and just crazy shit you had to do to get this core team of amazing people working together so smoothly. That's the real value of a company like ZenMaid, right? Yeah. And that's for me why I don't think I can sell my companies. When people come to me and they want to discuss finances and make an offer, I kind of laugh and I go like, I'll talk to you, but you're not going to give me a number where I'm going to sell this amazing team. Like it's just the chances of me doing this a second time are so small,
Yeah, exactly.
I think that I'm sensing that's the same thing for you.
Yeah, exactly. And like, honestly, I mean, like I would say, I got like lucky and that like, I think that I've worked hard, and I think that that I've earned this, but I think that there's an element of luck to everything, and there's a timing to everything. And I don't think that it would be easy to do this again. Like, I think that I could, I think that I have like the experience that like I could do it like again. I don't know, like if I want to, but one of the things that I think made ZenMaid not like different, but successful more than like any of our competitors that existed back in 2013 when we started, is that for me, when I saw that ZenMaid was making $2,000 a month from specifically maid service owners, right? It was 40 maid service owners that had very, very similar businesses that were each paying us $50 a month. $2,000 a month was nothing like at the time. But to me, I looked at that and was like, we have product market fit. And if these 40 folks want it, if we stick with it long enough, we will get 400 folks, and then we will get 4,000 folks if we just keep working on it long enough. And I always had like, on a long enough time frame, this will be successful. And that's something that, now, like, it's been 11 years. I don't want to go back to like to day one on this. Like, I love like how much we can get done now because of the team. It's like what you said. It's also that like I've empowered myself, that like now when I want something to happen, when I have an idea that I think we can make an impact with maid services, we now have the resources that I can talk to a couple of folks and we can come out with, a new guide, with like a new feature, with like whatever this is. I don't want to go back to the days when it's like all reliant on me, because like I'm not as talented as my team. Right? Like, I'm not going to serve people as well as like my team does. And like, I'm completely okay, like admitting that, So yeah, like I'm definitely in it for the long run. And I definitely believe that just like focusing on just making everyone in the industry as successful as possible. I think that our competitors can't afford to do that because they're not thinking long-term enough. Whereas for us, it's like, if I help everyone and it takes 5 years for us to get financially rewarded for that, I'm perfectly fine with that. And I think that's a huge advantage.
Just before I move on to the last question, one thing that I want to highlight is the amount of contributions that your team has given to the maid service community. You guys have a wonderful community called the Zen Maid Mastermind with thousands of maid service owners. You run the Maid Summit for free every year, where you get maid service business experts from a variety of niches and topics all together in one place and have them talk about their expertise for free. I think what you've done with the team has been very rare in our industry, and there's almost no other team I can think of who's been as giving as you have without asking for something in return. All you ask basically is that they check out the software, and if they like it, great, and if not, that's fine. But you guys have been great from day one at really giving to the community. I think that's one of your real strengths. So I just wanted to highlight on the call how giving your team has been. And so my last question for you, it's one that I always ask guests. I may ask it in a slightly different way, but it's essentially the same question. As business owners, we always have a million different ideas. We may have 2 or 3 businesses at any one time, but we're human. And so there's only so many things we can work on at any one time, right? And for you, I'm curious if there's a business or a project that you've had on the back burner in your mind for years or on your to-do list for years that you really want to start, but you just haven't gotten around to it yet. Is there one idea you feel really strongly about that you could see yourself going at it and really building it out?
You mean like ZenMaid related or unrelated or either?
Is there a business where when you look at all your business ideas and you go, that's next, I've got to do that. I keep thinking about it, but I haven't done it yet.
I don't really think so. Oh, actually, no. Okay, sorry. So there is. Okay, so I have a business that I want to do locally here in the UK that I would expect to lose money and to not be a great business, but it's something that I want to see like exist in the world. And that is like, essentially, I just want to create like almost like the perfect like third place or like hangout here in Brighton. And so like it's kind of built up in my head over the years, but like the initial idea that I had was essentially to do like a fit cafe, where I wanted to essentially have a cafe that, folks can come in and can work, sit down with their laptops or whatever, but there's a bunch of like healthy, like food options that have all of the macro information focused on high protein and everything. So that it's essentially just like, if you're like, kind of on a diet, whether you're bulking, cutting, whatever, you can come in and you can grab something that works for you. And then like since moving here, I've realized that there actually isn't like a really, really nice gym in the area. I'd mentioned some things that make me jealous in the US. I forget what there's some gym that I've seen at Total Fitness. I don't remember. There's some insane gyms that I've been seeing around the US that like they just don't have here, or like, you know, they have, I think, third place or third space or something in London. That's absolutely amazing. I essentially want to do that down here, like in Brighton. If they're not going to come down here and do it, like, then like I essentially just want to create that. But I mean, yeah, like, you know, dog friendly, maybe put like, you know, like a gym in or like, or whatever, like, you know, like I've got like a bunch of different ideas, but essentially just like a local space like for the community and for like hosting and stuff like that. So like my wife and I hosted like a coffee shop actually at our home, like in our apartment, you know, yeah, like last weekend. But yeah, that's less of a like for the money like kind of thing, because like I don't see how that would make any money. Like as when ZenMaid makes enough, then I will fund that project. But yeah, that's the dream. That's the dream.
Very cool. I would love for you to do that. I used to be a member of Third Space actually for a couple of years, and it was painfully expensive, but it was a good gym, man. It was really good.
One of my friends is a member, and every time he offers me a chance to like to go, I'm just like, I will come up from Brighton like for the day just to go like hang out there. I love that gym.
So as a side note to the audience, there's an area of London called Richmond that me and Amar have both spent time in. And the reason I'm mentioning this, Amar, is Third Space just signed a new location in Richmond. So they're actually building.
That's so cool. That's what was missing when I was there. I wanted to go from Richmond to Third Space. It was just too far to get to Canary Wharf.
Like an hour to Islington or something. Yeah, it's not close. But that's very cool, man. I would be so about that, especially the dog friendly part. Yeah. That is huge. If you could build like a dog playground or something, like something, you know, like something awesome attached to it, where like people want to go with their pets and like really have a good time, that would be super cool. That is pretty much all we had for you today, man. The last thing I would ask of you, if there's any entrepreneur who is thinking of starting in 2024 a SaaS business, is there any advice you'd give them before embarking on that venture?
I mean, I think this answer is probably on topic for the for the podcast. Maybe we'll talk about this like more like the next time. But I think thinking about like your why, that I think that SaaS is probably it's one of the best business models. I think that most folks will tell you that SaaS is like an amazing business model, right? That like, you know, the software like effectively like does the work for you and everything. You get paid a recurring amount. You know, customers, you just keep paying you over time. There's a lot of great things like about it. And that can lead to a grass is always greener kind of thing. So like, I would just say, if you're thinking about like a SaaS, I think you should be thinking about why, and like, are you starting with a problem that you're trying to solve, and like, how are you actually going about doing it? Because where I see folks that sort of go awry with it is when they sort of come in like just deciding that like this is the business model that they're going to do, and like in the real world it's about finding a problem and then finding the best solution for that problem in a way that'll get you paid. So I guess like really my advice would be like, question if it's like if it's actually like this SaaS that you want to build, or if you're romanticizing, you know, like doing that. You know, for reference, if I had paid for it out of pocket, building the initial version of ZenMaid essentially was about $250,000 like investment. I had my technical co-founder who essentially put in that time, but like at some point I went in and did the math, and like if you actually like looked at the time that me and him put in and everything that it took to get it like off the ground, it was effectively $250,000 to really like get an MVP going and to like validate and like and all of that stuff, right? Granted, we were young 20s, our time wasn't worth anything to us, so to us it was free.
Yeah.
But you know, in the real world, there is a cost to it, and so I just think that's something that's worth considering before you move forward. And then, you know, if you do move forward, then commit to it.
That's actually very good advice. Different business models have different costs to them, right? If you want to start a window cleaning company, you can go buy a window cleaning kit off Amazon or Walmart for $50. Yeah. And you could do door to door, and you could effectively have a business for $50 if you wanted.
Yeah.
SaaS is such a big commitment in time and cost. You have to really know. That's really good advice.
and your feedback loops are also really small, are also really big with SaaS as well. So like, for example, if you went and bought like window cleaner, you can go talk to a couple of neighbors, and if they all tell you to get lost, you know very quickly that like you're not a good salesperson, or that, you know, they don't need window washing or whatever it might be. With SaaS, you might invest that $250,000 to then find out that no one actually wants it, or that you completely missed the mark, right? There are ways around that. There's like lots of like good customer development and stuff that you can do to like avoid those sorts of things, but there's always that risk. And so, yeah, I think it's just, if you're looking at building a SaaS, just be aware that there are pros and cons, and consider the cons seriously, right? Like don't ignore them. I'm not saying not to do it, but like, you know, be aware, because it's not all rainbows and sunshine.
So, Amar, we had a bonus question for you. I wanted to ask you about work-life balance in your business. A book that's very near and dear to both our hearts has been The 4-Hour Workweek. In my case, it really gave me a perspective shift on how to use virtual assistants in my cleaning company to actually run it remotely and make that transition overseas. It was a pivotal book for me in how I actually ran the company and fundamentally ran my day-to-day life as well. I'm curious for you. I know The 4-Hour Workweek has been a huge book in your life too. Could you tell me what the impact of that book has been, and some of the practical advice that you've used from it in developing your business and keeping a balance in your life?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that book is amazing. Everyone watching this should like read it if you haven't like already. I feel like this is such a rabbit hole that we could go to. I'll limit my answer, right? So the first thing is the VA part. It was like massive. I have an executive assistant now that I've like kind of leveled up a little bit, and have someone that's a little bit higher level than that, and that person is absolutely like life changing for me, and I credit that book with a lot of it. But the thing that I think that most everyone listening right now should check out about that book, or could take away from that book, even if you don't go and read it, is the part on definition, where if you're looking to create the lifestyle that I believe all of the viewers are likely listening in because they have some aspirations of like that type, one of the most important things that you can do is define kind of what like that dream life is, or like what like that next sort of dream life, right? Because I think that as you at different levels in life, you aspire for more and more things, and I think that that's okay, but it's essentially figuring out kind of like what's next. And so for those that are watching this, there's a good chance that you have a local business that's already making money, but there's also a good chance that you haven't defined how much money it actually takes for you to live like your dream life, or like your perfect life right now. And so with that, the book talks about how, for example, let's say that your dream life is that you are only going to work like 4 or 5 hours a day. You're going to drop your kids off from school before and after work, and your house is going to be immaculate and spotless without you ever having to do anything, right? Which that last one, as maid service owners, it's like, of course, we run maid services, but for a lot of people, they don't give themselves permission to like hire like that. And so what Tim Ferriss talks about in the 4-Hour Workweek is how, if, for example, that's what you decide is, okay, like this is kind of like the next like sort of like phase of life, is I just want to, you know, for this year, this school year, I want to be able to drop the kid off and pick the kids up, right? Or like whatever like it might be. It's defining how much money does that actually take? What does it look like if you actually work that many hours like a week? You know, are you willing to give up an extra like customer or two like a month, and give up a small amount of growth in order to buy back that time? How much does it cost to have like, let's say like daycare for you to like work a little bit more if you're short on like on the goals? How much does it cost to get a house cleaner, or like a personal assistant, or whatever it might be? And so it sounds kind of like basic, but I think a lot of people, if you just take a pause and think about what you actually want, and then look at what's between that and where you are now, it's oftentimes a lot easier to reverse engineer how to get to where you want to be than most people think. I mean, Tim Ferriss, obviously, like, he wrote this book. He does a much better job of verbalizing it than I just did. But like, I cannot recommend that enough. And, you know, Chris and I were talking about this, that because so many folks watching this already have businesses, I think that that section of the book will be particularly just so impactful. A lot of the rest of it is on stuff that I think a lot of successful business owners don't really need to read. But I find that a lot of people that are successful, but maybe not satisfied they're not like living the life that they want to be living, oftentimes it's a lack of definition. Oftentimes in their head, they think they have it defined, but they've never like written it out. And so, I can show you notebooks going back, 15 years of me writing down the different things that I like that I wanted. And I'm not usually one to do that sort of stuff.
I'm really glad you mentioned that, actually, because that was a huge part for me too, is the afterlife. And not the afterlife as in the afterlife, but the afterlife from before reading the book. One of the things I found, I was very fortunate. This is more luck. Every year that I look back on this, I realize how much of this was luck and how little this was me. But my cleaning company grew quickly enough that I could hire help and move countries, right? And what I found very quickly was my objective, my meaning in building the business was to get over to Japan and be with my wife. Objective complete, right? But I was floundering for a couple of years after that because I had no sense of direction in what to do after. Like, I achieved the big goal, right? That was the big thing I set out to do. Yeah. But I didn't have anything after that I had to direct my energy and my efforts towards. And so my businesses stagnated. I kind of was just chilling, which isn't bad per se, but I was wasting in a sense. Now, from my perspective has changed. I now think I was wasting a lot of my time just sitting and doing nothing. I was rock climbing a lot, which was fun, and I don't think that was wasted. But I was really just living a somewhat hedonistic lifestyle because I didn't set a new goal after I'd achieved the big goal for what I wanted out of life. And one of the great things about the 4-hour work week is the detail that Tim forces you to go through as you actually imagine your life after you do what you've sought out to do. And I really like that bit too, because it's a forcing mechanism for forcing you to give yourself meaning and goals again. It's a classic retirement thing that people are experiencing earlier in life. It typically was you retire at 60 or 65 and you'd sit on the beach for a couple of years and you'd go crazy because you're bored and you don't know what to do anymore, right? You thought for 40 years, I want to sit at the beach and do nothing. But then when the day actually came, it was so boring, you didn't want to do it anymore, right? And people are experiencing that earlier and earlier now with the rise of digital nomadism, with the rise of online businesses. We have more flexibility than we did before. And so the meaning that we give ourselves in life is so much more important than it was before too, because we have to give it to ourselves now. It's not given to us anymore. So I'm really glad you mentioned that, because I think it's a really important part of the book.
And I feel like the 4-hour work week, it plants that dream of like living, kind of this life, that you and I have both created for ourselves. And I think that that's like really good. But I think actually where it's the most powerful is for folks that are already like relatively successful in business, because for them, it's like they can read that and can essentially snap their fingers and just like change their lives. I read that book at a time in my life where it took me another 7-8 years to figure out a way to make money to even begin, doing like all of that stuff. So I'm honestly pretty jealous of anyone listening that's already making a bunch of money and is about to read that book for the first time. It's going to blow your mind.
It's funny. It's kind of ironic. The cover is a tropical tree, but it's not really what it's about,
Yeah, so. It really is. He did a great job of like, it's like the whole thing of like, sell them what they want, give them what they need. He did a great job of selling the dream. But when you read the actual book, it really is less scammy than it sounds.
I know. I find the same thing with I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. I found a lot of value out of the personal finance system in that book, but the name is so scammy. Like, I can't recommend it to people,
Have you ever listened to, if you go back and listen to them, I forget whose podcast it was on, if it was on Ramit's podcast or on Tim's podcast, but it's the first time that they're on there. The first like 5 or 10 minutes, they just spend, because I think it was his, so I think it was like a long form, like 3-hour interview or something like that. And they probably spend like 5 to like 15 minutes just talking about how laughably bad the names of like their things are. It's like they're very self-aware about it. But yeah, they literally had exactly this conversation.
How funny is that? Very cool. So number one book recommendation from both of us is The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. Amar, the best place to find you is your company is ZenMaid.com or on Facebook, the Zen Maid Mastermind Facebook group. To find you, do you prefer a website? Do you prefer your Twitter? How can people connect with you personally?
Yeah, connect with me personally. So there's my personal website, which is theamericandream.com. That's like the American dream, but spelled Amar, A-M-A-R. Very clever, I know. And then my Twitter handle is it's just Amar. So that's where I share a lot of my thoughts on business and stuff. I'm very available. You know, if you're watching this and you're a maid service owner and you want to drop me a message or anything about ZenMaid or about anything we've talked about here or anything, you can always reach me at amar@ZenMaid.com. You know, I can't promise to get back to you like the same day, depending on like how busy I am and everything, but I will always reply if I see that. So yeah, don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that I can assist with.
If it's Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, don't expect a reply from him.
Yeah.
Very cool. Amar, thank you so much for coming on, man. It's been a real pleasure.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.